oh, before we start, I read your paper and I just want to know, what did you mean by this? It was fascinating. And I'm just like asked all these questions and he's like, oh, well, oh. And he just puffed his chest out and just started talking about himself. And then my friend said, look, you should just go for the interview. And so I was looking at, does emotional intelligence buffer stress? That was my kind of research question. And then measuring stress through cortisol. So, because I know when people talk about stress, they either lie, either fabricate, catastrophize, or people under-report stress. So I said, we need to find an objective way to measure stress. And so I was like, oh, okay. So then I knew this guy from the military was coming up. There was like 200 people they were going to interview up in Queensland at the universities to try and see who they would give the money to. And I was like, oh, I've got no chance. So then I thought I'd take a different tact. And so I researched who this guy was and realised that he was a war historian and he'd written these white papers. And so I read these papers. They were boring. and so I remember there's this long line of people going to be interviewed by this guy. And I was with my supervisor. And I sit down and he goes, what's your name? I said, Jemma. He goes, what's your research? And I said, it's a preemptive approach to stress using emotional intelligence training, using, cortisol. And he's like, oh. And then I'm like, oh, before we start, I read your paper and I just want to know, what did you mean by this? It was fascinating. And I'm just like asked all these questions and he's like, oh. And he just puffed his chest out and just started talking about himself.
To his ego.
And then my supervisor's looking at me like, what do you, we need to talk about your research. And he's just going, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, it's fascinating. Tell me more like this. And then he goes, where I was, tell me about your research. And I said, well, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you know what? I've suffered from mental health disruption. I love it. It's really, really good. I just think this is fantastic. And I love the objective nature. And then it was time up. We went out and my supervisor was like, yes, that was brilliant. Oh my God, can't believe it. And I said, yeah, I used emotional intelligence. And then she was super excited. I was super excited. I was like, yeah, probably got it. And then I heard nothing for like 6 months. And I was like, I obviously just buggered that up. That was dumb. I don't really care anyway. I didn't really want it, And then I get this email out of the blue saying, congratulations, you've won the Army research funding. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? Because I'd prepared to go into a bank and I was going to test bankers and on street, like people who did trading and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then so my life, it was like sliding doors. I just took this trajectory and towards the military. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So then I actually went and got a meeting with the intelligence corps up here because the guys there were very stressed out because they'd have to see a lot of really awful material and have to make decisions were quite stressful. And then I met a woman who was in defence intelligence. She said, no, go and work for Special Forces. So then she told them about me. They said, yes, you've got to come and work with us because our population has seen the most amount of kinetic, engagement. Most guys have been killed. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm like, was it literally what's the Special Forces? I was so naive. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So then